Hi, sorry if you're coming into this. I did start a live feed, and then we had some noise distractions at the house, so I'm restarting it now. So, what I was saying though is when I chose Judges 1 and 2 last week, it's about a time of unrest in a nation where it's struggling with leadership, struggling with power issues. I had no idea at that point what we'd be looking at this week. As I read this and talk with this through with you, right now in our own town, there are protesters on the street. I can hear the sounds. I want to cover a couple pieces of that. We're going to talk a little bit on Sunday about the differences between peaceful protesters and what we're seeing in some places happening at night with some violence. We'll look at those questions a little bit more on Sunday, but I do want to just say, whatever you choose to do, it is your call. But be mindful that if you do choose to be a peaceful protester, to wear your mask, try to keep your social distancing so that you don't bring it home in the midst of this or bring it to the community. But also, when you're making your statements, remember that this is not going to change always overnight. We can pray that it will, but to not lose heart, because I think some of our younger people tell me, well, they don't see a change right away. And I'm just being reminded by Martin Luther King Jr.'s, his words throughout time sound as much today's issues as it was then. So to hold on and know that whatever you're doing, if you're praying, if you're protesting, as long as you're not doing that mob mentality violence, then you are making a difference. And to just know to not give up on change. Change does take time, but real important change, when it really takes, will change the world. But be safe in all of this. We are still going through this pandemic in the midst of this, and just keep yourself and your family and your community safe. All right, well, we think about that time of unrest with Judges. And so last week we looked at the beginning of Judges. We looked at Judges 1 and 2. We're going to jump to Judges 3, where it says the nations left in Canaan. These are the nations that the Lord left in the land to test those Israelites who had not experienced the wars of Canaan. And that's 3:1. He did this to teach warfare to generations of Israelites who had no experience in battle. These are the nations. And it's going to list some of the nations that are still there, that were still on the land. And we talked about last week that there were people, instead of the rest of the earlier books where Israel came in and just automatically became a power, here they're struggling. And I think this really resonates with people right now. This message of how to live among people that are different than you. And I mean, we can talk about race as part of it right now, but also Democrats and Republicans. We can talk about people who want to open, who want to keep it closed. There's all these differences of life. And how do you live in that? How do you live in that? You all have a call as Christians to respond to living into it. Judges reminds us that we're going to be asked to live into times when we don't all have the same religion, come from the same background, have the same story, have the same experiences. And how do you work through those kind of things? You have an entire book right here that we're working through that is really just about that same reality. So if we're looking, that was 3:1. If we continue down to 3:2, it says that God did this to teach warfare to generations of Israelites who had no experience in battle, that he left the people that they're going to fight. And how do you fight in a way that doesn't increase the violence? How do you fight with your words and your heart and your prayers, and not use it to inflame? And I think that's what we're having to ask some of our leadership right now, right? Are you making the right choices to not teach the next generation the wrong, but to teach the generation that's rising up how to use their words and their hearts to make substantial change? So he's going to list the nations on verse 3, and a verse that just again tells us that, these are the people that were left. So verse 5 says, so the people of Israel lived among these individuals, like the Canaanites and the Hittites and Amorites and a lot of ites. But it says on verse 6, they intermarried with them. Israelite sons married their daughters. So we're beginning to see that these are intermingling, right? And think how in our own history, race marriages, right? How just a few decades ago, you would not see people of different races married, people of different religions, right? That's what this is asking the question of, and how do you live into that? Our Bible's not great on this in these early stories, right? Because there's a lot of tension. Ezra especially is going to say things like, get a divorce from them if they're from a different culture. Well, we as Americans in this time and in this place know that that's not the answer. You have to learn to live with everybody's differences. No matter what your color is or your story is, nobody has the same story. It's actually greater. The diversity makes us stronger, makes us better. So they're beginning to live into their diversity in Judges 3. It says, and the Israelites served their God, though. This is where the change happens, right? It wasn't just that they were intermingling in cultures and stories and religions. Now they're starting to give up God. And that's where you got to watch it, right? That's where we have to, in the midst of whatever we go through, if we're going through a pandemic, if we're going through grief, if we're going through divorces, if we're going through unemployment, if we're going through challenges in our home or challenges in our world, abuse, any of this kind of stuff, right? The difficult stuff. How do you hold on and not give up God? How do you not get led astray into a different direction? How do you hold on to who you believe in? That's really going to be a lot of the important thing about Judges, right? So we go to verse 7. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. They forgot about the Lord their God, and they served the images of Baal and Asherah poles. Asherah is a female goddess. Baal is a Canaanite god. So they're starting to follow the wrong way. Oh. Can you not hear me? Nancy says you can't hear me. Oh no! Nancy, can you hear me now? Great. All of that, and I just did that long, and I don't think anybody's heard it.